you don't need to turn on the microphone on your computer? Okay. Great. Now let's get started. Just to briefly introduce our program, the Lemelson-MIT Program is a multifaceted program for inventors at all ages. We have over 15 years of experience of working with secondary school teachers and students on invention projects, specifically through our JV Inventive Grants Initiative, and Eureka Fest programs. This evening, I'm very happy to invite Mike Gallagher, one of our master teachers, to co-host today's webinar with me. A little bit information about Mike. Okay, so Mike leads the Technology Education Department in Saratoga Springs High School in New York. He's an experienced project leader teacher. Approximately 10 years ago, Mike led the Saratoga Springs High School invent team to invent the garden consultant. So Mike, welcome. Can you tell us more about the invention your team created?
Sure. So the garden consultant was it was an application that the students developed with. It took a testing procedure that a group of Cornell professors had come up with to tell you what would grow best in your current conditions in your garden without having to modify your garden. And there were 16 tests that was in the handbook. The students automated most of them and were able to go out to Cornell and meet with the authors, and they ended up endorsing our product before we made it out to MIT. So it was a great project and a lot of fun to participate.
Wow, that's very exciting. Thanks a lot, Mike. I really wish every school in the New England area can be equipped with your garden consultant, so that kids will actually see the plants growing instead of dying in the gardens. Okay, so before we start talking more detailed about the models, modes, and casts, first let's do two quick polls. Okay, so the first one is, have you ever done molding or casting before? So on your screen, you should be able to see the poll, so please quickly answer the questions here. Okay, great. Okay. And let's do the second one. So have you ever used the ice trees or bunny cake pans? Again, filling this poll. Okay, great. Yeah, so it seems none of us have already had experience with molding or casting, but all of us have used the ice trees or bunny cake pans. That's great. Yeah. So yeah. So first thing I want to tell you guys is ice trees and bunny cake pans, yes, they are actually molds. And the ice cubes and the bunny cakes you're making are actually casts. So we work with models, molds, and casts almost every day in our lives. So going back a little bit to the definition of the models, models are the original design about this object that you want to reproduce. So the models can be made out of materials like clay or wax or stones or foam or even metals. So the models will include all the details, texture, and dimensions of the object you want to create. For the molds are the negative impression that capture all the details of the models so that you can reproduce it over and over. There are different types of molds and molding processes. Basically, this depends on what kind of final objects that you want to make. For invention projects, specifically among secondary students, we focus on one-piece molding because it's relatively easier and it's more manageable among students at this age. And finally, the cast is a positive impression or reproduction of the original model. Casting is a manufacturing process where typically a liquid casting material is poured into a mold and then allow it to solidify. The solidified part is actually the cast, which is ejected or broken out of the mold. So here you can see the three pictures at the bottom. The very left one is a model made of clay, and this is a shoe sole made by students. And in the middle, this is the mold of this shoe sole, and on the right side is the actual cast made of the shoe sole. Okay. So next, these two pictures, just to show examples of one-piece mold. Now let's look more closely at the molds. So the open part of this mold is larger than the closer part of the mold, so that the flat one-piece cast can easily come out with the mold. Okay. So advantage of this one-piece block mold is that this technique actually yields accurate production, which will potentially minimize the post-finishing time students need to do. So if based on our experience, even with students create a great mold, and afterwards when they do the casting, they always want to spend more time to make sure the final cast will capture all the details. So that's going to cost a lot of time. So it's great if we start with one piece block mold, and that's going to reduce their time. Okay. And next, this is an example of a one-piece molding using in invention projects. And this is one of the JV Invent team guides that entitled Shoe Soles. That basically students need to use the clay to create shoe sole models, and using a molding material called White Flex 30 to create one-piece molds and also the cast. Specifically, White Flex 30 is a kind of a molding rubber that is sold by Smooth On. On that website, they also offer a series of molding rubbers for different purposes. Students enjoy this guide a lot. Here you can see that in these pictures, these two pictures are students are trying to work on the clays and sculpting with their clays to make their perfect model of the shoe soles. And on the right side, these are the three girls are trying to mix this White Flex 30 molding materials, and so that they can pull them in the mold box they created. So in this JV guide, the students use clay to create models. Now with a lot of schools and even families, they have 3D printers, and 3D printed figures actually are ideal models for molding. Mike, I know your students use this 3D printed figures. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So what I threw out to my students was I wanted to make a production run on a product, and the 3D printed models are fantastic, but can take a long time to make. So I said we're going to do a casting version of it, so we can do a big run off of them. And you look at upper left-hand corner, this group here that I just picked, they made they were characters out of video games. So they took some 2D old school video games, Pac-Man, and they converted them into what they would look like if they were 3D. Then we 3D printed them, and then we made casts, and there's a finished product in the lower right-hand corner. So that's kind of our workflow there.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And we'll have some more pictures of it later on, but I even have some examples. I went to my classroom, so I have some stuff I can show you later on as well.
Okay, yes, that's great. Thank you very much, Mike, for the creative use of this 3D printed figures. Okay, so next, before we talk about the materials, can you talk about the safety rules when kids work with molding and casting?
So it's really important here, more so than I think anything else that I've done in my computer integrated manufacturing course. You have to be aware that this material that you're going to be working with, if it gets on students' clothing, they're not going to be able to get it off. It could potentially stick to your floors, and I got a little bit on my countertop here at school. It took a lot to get it off. So be very cautious. that you don't get it on your hair, your clothes. We're going to show an example later on of a vest that I give for my students. And make sure that, their hair is tied back. You're wearing safety goggles. I'll also use a paper mask. And another thing is their shoes. You want to make sure that their shoes, they're cautious that when they're working on it, maybe they keep their feet under the counter. But even I suggest you put something on the floor to make sure that you don't get anything on the floor. You just have to be prepared that it's not, finger paint that's going to easily come off. That's all. I'm not trying to scare you, but you just need to be aware of that.
Great. Yeah. Thanks a lot, Mike. Yeah, for emphasizing that. Okay. So next I'm going to talk about the materials so that you can get more sense about how you can potentially work on this. So specifically for this shoe sole project, the materials and tools it's going to be used include this, of course, the safety glasses and absolutely gloves. And as Mike mentioned, you need to have some kind of protection so that students' tables and workplace will be protected, and so that the molding and casting materials won't get onto those. And students need to work with the clay and also have some kind of clay sculpting tools. And finally is the molding and casting material, which we using in the shoe sole project is called Right Flex 30. In order to use that material, you also need to have certain kind of stirring sticks and also release agent. For Flex 30, they comes with two parts, A and B. Here you can see they have the two colors, the yellow color and also the the blue colors. And these two parts need to be mixed together prior to use. And it has a pot life about 30 minutes after the two parts are mixed, which means once you make the mixture, the mixture need to be poured over the model or into the mold right away. So typically we recommend you have students start working on the clay, working on their models, and also create their mold box, which we're going to talk in a little bit. And afterwards, then you start preparing the mixture so that once the mixture is ready, they can be immediately poured. And once you pour this mixture, there's also a cure time of about 16 to 18 hours before it can be removed from the model or the mold. Okay. So this is just again, there's three pictures. Kids start making a clay model, and they use Right Flex 30 to create the molding. And on the very right hand is where students apply a purple dye into the mixture and create a cast of a purple shoe sole. So, Mike, with your students using these 3D printed figures, can you talk about what kind of molding and casting processes in general are involved in this?
Okay, so after we took what you saw there was a 3D printed model, I'm going to grab this cursor here, kind of bring it down, make sure I got it this time. Oh, I got it. Okay. So this is the 3D printed model, and I had the students hot glue that down to a piece of cut foam core, and then make a box that held that. And this was our first time doing it. What you see is a parting line. That was an area that we picked that kind of had the least detail in it. So when we had to cut the part out later on, we would do as little damage to the part as possible. And then we poured it in, and we left it overnight. I understand that you can work with it after, I think it was like 16 hours on the directions. Mm-hmm. But we just come back in the next day, same time, and it works. And then I actually have an example here of one of them. You can't see, it's actually pretty stiff material. Then this is an actual cast that came out of one of them.
Okay.
So this is not a 3D printed part. But yeah, there's some smaller ones.
That's great. Yeah. So, Mike, you just mentioned talk about the molding. So, the molding and casting processes are a little bit similar. Can you also explain about the casting processes when your kids
So
are doing the casting?
So with the casting, once we pour the casting material into the mold, then you pop the part out, and that's the really fast part of it. So you could do that in like 20 minutes. So we were able to do in a block. We were able to do a few of the parts, and as opposed to like the original 3D printed parts, some of these larger parts and parts with a lot of detail end up taking upwards of 18, 20 hours to print. And with this, we were able to get fantastic detail and do it really rapidly. And in fact, if you were to really look at this closely, you could see the layers that came out of the 3D printer. That's how fine the actual detail is in this thing. It's pretty remarkable what you're able to get out of this 3D or the casting. It puts a lot of detail out.
Mhm. Yes, yes. So with the casting processes, Mike was just mentioned the cast. I think the queue time of the casting material it really depends on what kind of materials you are using. So in the example Mike was just mentioned about, I believe Mike you are using one of the fast kit queue
Yep.
kit about 20 minutes of the queue time. And again, if you are using the White Flex 30 as we did in the Shuso mode, in the Shuso unit, the queue time is going to be about 16 hours. Again, this depends on what kind of materials you choose. You can find all the details about the properties of the materials on Smooth On website. They offer all this. Yes. So just to summarize a little bit, so both the molding and the casting processes are similar. So what you do is with the molding, you create a mold box first, and then you prepare the molding materials and make sure you spray the release agent on the model, and then you pour the mixture into the mold box and cue and remove the model. And for the casting, again, you prepare the casting materials, you spray the release agent, and you pour the materials, and then you core. You wait for the cure time. Okay. So when you implement specifically the Shuso projects among students, here there are some tips. First, the White Flex 30 materials need to be mixed well but carefully. A paint stirrer is definitely helpful, and make sure that your students always wear gloves and safety glasses so that the materials won't try to get those material on you. And here you can see a picture. This is a picture actually of Mike's students this morning. She was wearing the vest Mike prepared for students when they are working with molding and casting materials. And also make sure you always cover the table or the workplace, or if you have a carpeted floor, make sure you cover the floor with some kind of paper protection or even just a cardboard. Make sure they wouldn't get onto that. And for the second tip is that when students work on the mold box, make sure the mold box is well sealed so that the materials doesn't escape. So we typically recommend using aluminum foil pans with flat bottoms so that as long as the model is not too high. And also be aware that the molding and casting materials are relatively expensive. So that you want to try to be conservative so that because often students need to do a few iterations so that you can always have some materials for them if they want to do a revision of their work.
The one thing that I would, can I interject?
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. The only thing that I want to add is if you look at the models that I showed when I made those boxes, the students made them too large, especially in the corner. There's like a lot of wasted material. So what we learned afterwards as a good approach is to take some of the molding clay and to pack it in around the extra space so you're not wasting as much material. So when we did our iterations on design, the later models, we were wasting a lot less, and it actually ended up being much easier to work with.
That's a great suggestion. Yeah. So we need to try to yeah, try to be conservative about the materials so that we can allow students to have more fun with that. That's really creative. Yeah. Okay, so the third suggestion we want to give is to make sure you will spray the release agent on the inside and outside of the mold. So again, the release agent, you can find them on the Smooth On website. And one thing is that the white flax 30 material itself doesn't smell that much, but release agent, it smells. So make sure when you are doing the spray, you can do it outdoors, or if you have a chemical hood in the science lab, make sure you can do that under a chemical hood. The fourth suggestion is, on the Smart On website, there are a series of materials. And I would recommend any teachers or any of you, before you want to try this, make sure read the properties of the materials and try to choose those soft molding materials so that because it's easier for students to pop up the cast. It's very important, okay? And fifth, and it's the most important rule of any invention projects, be prepared to fail and encourage students to have fun and learn from the failures. Yeah. So you will find that typically students, the first time, they might find a lot of problems. For example, they might find bubbles in their cast and all this. And students, these are all the fun parts. Students will figure out solutions and in their second iterations. Okay, so we would just mainly talk about one-piece molding. And Mike, I know your students, you also try other types of molding. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Okay, so I was fortunate, got a bunch of old technology equipment in, when I first started teaching here, and one of them was a vacuum former. You see that piece of green thing, looks like garbage there. It looks basically, to explain how it operates, is it's like a air hockey table with a series of little holes in this bed right here. But like an air hockey table blows the air up, this has a vacuum in it and it sucks down. And what the students do is they make a model just like they did where we 3D printed it. You could take clay and use it in here, or you could use machine wax or anything you like. And whatever you put into there, you then slide a piece of plastic over the top of it, heat it up. This right here is like your toaster oven, has a heating element in it. You slide it over the piece, turn on the vacuum, it sucks the plastic down. This is a plastic piece right here. And then this plastic is food grade plastic. And I then heat up chocolate, and we put chocolate in them, so they're chocolate molds. These are some examples of our student work up here. So what I'm missing is the model. So the model is gone. Here's the mold and then the cast. Okay.
Is actually cast the candy?
Yeah.
That's the chocolate?
The kids get to eat the candy. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. I know you also use the CNC machines for injection molding. Can you also tell us about that?
Okay, so we have a CNC machine here. And what we do is we do some practices with machine wax. And once they get it down, then we have the students machine out some aluminum blanks. And then what we do in this case is we put these blanks into this portion down here. It heats up plastic BBs that we put in here, and we pull down. I'm sorry, I forget that you don't see my cursor unless I grab this thing.
Yeah.
So this arm right here, you pull that down, and it pushes the hot melted plastic into the part. So here's a nice example. We have a bunch of store-bought ones as well. And this is a guitar pick, and it works. This one's a nice, easy one. Works every time.
Okay. Yeah, this is a really great invention projects. I assume students will definitely love this, especially the chocolate candies.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So here I just want to share a few resources related to the invention projects and also the molding casting. The first is the Lemelson-MIT Resources on our website. We have a description about their program, also our inventive and JV inventive grant initiative, and also all the JV inventive's curriculum materials, including the shoe soles guide we were just talking about. They are all online, and you can download the student version and also the educator's version. That has everything you will need in order to implement this project in your classrooms. And also, I will recommend you also look at the inventor archive that include information about the historical inventors. And specifically for the resources related to molding and casting, Smooth On website first include all the different materials for molding and casting, and also include a series of tutorials on how you can do this. And the same for Rayon's Materials Advanced, they also offer a few tutorials on how to work with molding and casting. And also, if you look into the instructables.com, they offer 6 lessons on molding making and casting materials. They talk about the procedures and the suggestions on materials and how you can potentially work on different materials. So again, I recommend you to all check them out so that you can get some ideas about how you can potentially make this work in your invention program. Okay, so yeah, now we